Just learning from our producers at the Pentagon that there has been a sizable launch of Tomahawk cruise missiles tonight. We're told over 50 of them in a single volley hitting targets on the ground in Syria. Our correspondent Hans Nichols is ready to tell us what they've been told at the Pentagon. Hans?
We're still learning more on this, but here's what we know. There have been Tomahawk cruise missiles fired off of Navy ships in the eastern Mediterranean. They had a single target. That target was an airfield near Homs, which is a major commercial city. It was an airfield. Looks like there are more than 50 impacts. It just looks like the Tomahawks were fired. The goal there might have been to pock up the runway, maybe take out some Syrian aircraft. We're learning more as we speak, but this launch has happened against the regime of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. This marks an escalation in an already very complicated war. We'll get back to you when we have more information. Brian?
Okay, Hans, just one more point here. In the Mediterranean, I believe we have the USS Porter and the USS Ross that would be ready to fire missiles like this, even though all of our vessels over a certain size and certainly all of our nuclear submarines are potential launching platforms. How big, how small is a volley of 50 of these, considering we're talking about a 1,000-pound warhead on each?
1,000-pound warhead is what they can carry. The fact that there were just Tomahawks and that this didn't include any fixed-wing bombings gives you an indication, Brian, that this is a proportional response. You know, when there had been talk about this leading up to, there had been a range of options that we know the Pentagon had been preparing. The far end of the range, disabling the entire Assad Air Force. It looks like they didn't go in that direction. It looks like President Donald Trump ordered a more proportional response. This came from those two ships that you mentioned in the Eastern Med, just Tomahawks. Now, what we want to find out is whether or not there are any ally conversations with U.S. allies, either in the counter-ISIL regime, and crucially, if there was a conversation with the Russians. Remember, there's a deconfliction hotline going on right now for the fight against ISIS. That's the other enemy and adversary in Syria. And the Russians and U.S. counterparts speak all the time on that hotline. Whether or not the Russians were given a heads up, any sort of tip, that's another thing we'll be looking for. We also don't know if there have been any casualties on the ground, if there's been anything like that. But we can report that this strike happened. It happened moments ago, and it appears it's over. This appears to be a one-off strike. But President Trump making good and restoring this idea of crossing red lines, doing something President Barack Obama didn't do, and that is attack the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Brian?
So, Hans, I understand you're limited to what we know. Far from regime change, far from targets all over that country, this could turn out to be a strike on the air facilities where it's believed the sarin gas, suspected sarin gas airstrike started.
Yeah, we don't know the source of the sarin gas. We haven't confirmed that it's sarin gas, but this would be the airfield from which the fixed-wing aircraft that U.S. radar clearly saw hit that building about 72 hours ago, that this is the airfield that they took off from. That gets back to this idea of proportionality. Now, I know we heard from Secretary Mattis earlier today talking about the idea underway being an effort for regime change or a transition of power for Assad. This doesn't seem to be a strong hint that the U.S. is militarily going to go in the direction of regime change. This seems like it's a proportional response. And I also think we should note, Brian, the speed with which this happened, the velocity of this response. Just 72 hours ago, on Tuesday morning, dawn in Syria, that's when this chemical weapons attack happened. 72 hours later, there's a response from this administration. Brian?
All right, Hans Nichols at the Pentagon. We're going to let him go.